Hey, it's Jay, and it's time to jabber. Woke up this morning and, knowing the date, started to write, and it culminated in this poem. I tweeted it out and put it out earlier, but I'm just going to share it with you. Time moves on. Time moves on, and some things are forgotten, but other things, rightly so, remain. Time moves on, and some wounds heal, but scars, seen and unseen, remain. Time moves on, and life continues around us, but some things should always remain. Never forget. That's obviously a poem because it is the 15th anniversary of the atrocities of 9/11. Got me thinking about a couple of things. Got me thinking that there are people, young people alive today, who don't remember the feelings of that day. It's sort of like my generation's where were you when you heard whatever it may be, whether it was, when Kennedy was shot or when Elvis died or whatever. You sort of remember that day. It's just there in your memory. And there are people today, 15, 16, 17, 18 year olds, who don't actually recall that. They are living in a world where the terrorist threats are, let's face it, everywhere. And I know it doesn't stem from them, from that time, from that moment, but that was a defining moment in our world's history, not just the history of America, but the history of the world. That was a defining moment. And there's people living today, there's people dying today in the terrorist atrocities around the world who weren't even alive when that happened, who have no link, as it were, to that. And that's just a scary thing. The other thing it got me thinking about is the whole thing about forgetting. Obviously, things like that, those of us that lived through it, who were, old enough to be aware, we will never forget that day. And we all have these moments, these days, when things happen and we never forget. Be it amazing things like when you were proposed to, or when you proposed to someone even, or when your child was born, or when you got that first job, or whatever it may be, your first kiss. All the negative things. Things such as that. Things, atrocities. When family members pass away. When you lose that job, when you lose that lover. The days like that we're never going to forget. And yet, there are people in my life, and I'm sure there are people in yours, that also don't forget about those really silly things. Those small things that happen in everyday life. That argument that you had down the pub. That disagreement you had over coffee. That moment where you tore your friend's top when you borrowed it. Or whatever, small insignificant things. And yet people remember them and they hold on to the feelings that they had at that time. And I have to admit that I'm like that at times. There are times when I find myself remembering smallest of things that got me angry at the time or got me upset at the time, and holding on to that anger or that fear or that feeling of being upset and keeping it with me and taking it forward on the small things when there's so many other bigger things around out there. Forgiving is a whole different matter. The whole link between forgetting and forgiving. Forgiving is a whole different matter. I think, personally, we've got to learn to forgive the small things because they don't really matter in the grand scheme. And we need to forget the small things as well. Because so what if that top got stains on it? So what if they lost your, I don't know, your favourite mug or your, whatever it may be? Those are small things in this life. And there are big things going on that we need to focus on. There's people dying of terrible diseases. There's people going through hardships. There's people being persecuted. There's atrocities happening around the world. Those are what we should focus on and not forget about. Should we forgive these big things? I think that's down to individual conscience. But I'm sure that we shouldn't forget. History can teach us things. History can make sure we don't make the same mistakes again. It is our duty to keep alive the history that has happened. Whether it be remembering those who gave their lives, who had their lives taken away 15 years ago on 9/11. Whether it is the 7/7 bombings in the UK. Whether it is the Second World War, the Holocaust. Whatever it is we're talking about, those are the big things that need to be remembered. They should never be forgotten. We need to teach the younger generation about these so they don't make the same mistakes. Those mistakes that are happening now. It is our duty to keep the memory alive and definitely to never forget.